Hey everyone, welcome back to another awesome webinar from integrativelifenetwork.com, which is a feature of Integrative Life Center, a awesome mental health substance abuse treatment center in Nashville, Tennessee. And I've got my friend Pasha Hogan on today. And when you're in for a treat, I was already talking about, I was looking, the past week I've been looking around at everything, this thing called creative discovery. And I'm so ready to dive in, Pasha, to your story, how the narrative and storytelling and reframe and think about our lives. And but first, thanks for being on. And then second,
Pleasure.
could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, right now I'm in Ireland. I've been here for about the last 5 months and probably heading back to Santa Fe. I mean, plan is a very loose word these days, but hopefully in February at some point. And if that's where I live right now, I've been back and forth from to Ireland for the last 20 years. And I guess this is where it all started for me, really. So it's been interesting to be full circle. I did my psychotherapy training here and really was delved into all the work that I'm doing now. Really started here with working on myself.
Really?
So
Was
yeah,
it
I
an
guess.
ancestry thing? Was it a travel thing and you found, why Ireland?
Well, when you're 14 years old and your parents tell you you're moving to Ireland,
Okay.
that's where
Okay.
you're going.
Yeah.
So my parents are both Irish, and it was always a dream of my dad's to buy a farm and move to Ireland. So that's what we did from New York City when I was just about to go into high school.
Oh, wow.
We bought a farm, which in the farmhouse that I'm sitting in right now, and my family are all still here, and so it's a place that I've traveled back and forth from for, yeah, I guess, wow, since I was 14, really. So yeah, so it definitely ancestry, and it's, very much a part of as I'm here now, a lot of the stories that I'm delving into are a lot of the old stories and folk tales and folk myths, from this area as well. So it's just very interesting how, when you're in a certain place too, things become more alive for you, you
Mm,
know. And I guess really my journey started into this type of work that we're all engaged in um, over 20 years ago. And for me, like most people, when they get interested in the healing arts, something happens, right?
mm-hmm.
That interrupts your life according to, how you think it's supposed to be going. And for me, that was a breast cancer diagnosis when I was 26 years old
Mm,
and living a very fast-paced corporate life in London at the time. And then again, when I was 29, living in Dublin, this time for another reinsurance firm. And I knew things were a little out of balance when I was asking my boss to bring in huge piles of insurance files and walking out of the hospital with a prosthesis in one hand and a bunch of work files in the other,
mm.
really unaware at that time, really how wildly out of balance my life was. And it took a third time, hence the name of my first book, Third Time Lucky, because I felt like that time I was lucky because I stopped. I full stop, really. And that was when I was 31 years old. So that really is, just around that time, I feel when, the world stopped for me as I knew it, certainly. And I really became, my questions started changing,
Mm.
from what am I going to tell my boss, to, how long do I have to live? And how do I want to spend my time here? And what makes my heart sing? How can I be of service, not just to my ego and ideas of what I think success is, and how can I heal?
Mm.
So it was really, Corey, it was me working on me
Yeah.
that brought me to this work, which, is an ongoing project. It's never ending. Um, I think Ram Dass says, if you think you're anywhere near enlightenment, which I certainly don't, but go spend 3 days at home. You know?
Oh,
So I've been here for 5 months now, so I'm well aware there's plenty more creative discovering for me to do too, which is great, which is what else would we be doing,
oh,
really?
it's and talk about those 3 days that he mentions. We've been in this pandemic where, you know, been forced to be very
Right.
isolated from our other humans. And I know you for the last 5 months you've been in Ireland, and I don't even know how travel works now internationally, but so what a good word. So I'm curious, okay, the three, most people I know it's one diagnosis, but three. You were doing corporate work, and did you start to transition into therapy and healing from that point on after the third?
Yes. Yeah, that was so really after my second diagnosis when I was 29, coming out of the hospital with the files and the prosthesis, I thought, you know, something's got to shift here. And I began to start asking some different questions around that time and engaged in going to therapy, sought a therapist out myself,
Mm-hmm.
and ended up loving it and loving that process of being curious and not running back to the same old answers and asking new questions. And I just thought, I want to spend my life in this, staying curious, and in wonderment about what is healing and what is living a full life, and how can you do that? And what is it like to walk in the world feeling that you're in alignment with, your soul life, with your heart,
Mm.
and make a living and be part of society and all of these things. So, and I became interested in yoga at that time as well. And a lot of it was for health reasons. And then
Mhm.
again, just it was joy for me, like having a relationship with my body in a different way. And the same with Reiki and energy work. So it was all through me working on me, as I said
Mhm.
before, that that I began to get really interested. And there was a much bigger world, available than I was living. And
Then
so
running around
that's how it
with the
started.
then running around in the corporate race there. It sounds like you were talking about in London, and I can't imagine coming out with that you said the two things, this pile of work and what had just happened to you, this change and in your life, in your body and all that.
Mm.
So when you talk about creative discovery, and I know there's also that first book was creative recovery, and that's a lot
Mhm.
of the work you do here. Are those two different? And if so, could you kind of unpack that where, I don't want to assume anything, but the creative discovery, creative recovery, and then I can't wait to get into these questions because your work deals with the questions I think we all ask, but I have asked personally the last couple of years for like really sure what am, what am I doing here?
Right. The big
The
64,000.
big ones.
Who am I, and who am
Yes.
I and what is it all for? Um, so yeah, creative recovery, and creative discovery, creative recovery grew, I felt, into creative discovery, but they're not separate by any means at all. I felt when I started, again, about 20 years ago, actually, about 18 years ago, I moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico from Dublin, having done my own psychotherapy training here. And then I went on to do a postgrad in arts and empowerment training. And I just realized I loved working with groups so much. And I
Mm,
loved the creative process. And I didn't consider myself to be creative at all when it comes to traditional ways, we think
mhm,
about being creative, Um, and I thought, wow, well, I think just the fact of being alive and, is a creative act, and creative process, and started expanding my, view on what that meant. And when I came up with creative recovery, as I said, through all, my own work, I realized that third time that I really wanted to participate in the next part of my life in a much more
mm,
conscious way.
mm.
And I made this declaration that I'm going to participate this in a creative way.
Mhm.
And I didn't even know what that meant. I had no clue what that meant or what that looked like, which was probably a blessing at the time, not to know. And because, I think a lot of us wouldn't sign up for
Right.
what we know we're going to have to uncover and look at
How true is that?
and all of this. So really, that's where creative recovery came from, was having me wanting to have a creative relationship with wholeness,
Mm.
and living a full life. And it started off in Ireland, actually, around my kitchen table, starting women's groups, calling it Creative Recovery, and then moving to Santa Fe, New Mexico. And I started working with hands-on community art. If anyone's from Santa Fe here, it was a great nonprofit for the community to come in and make art, for free. And there was the founder, Betsy Millard, wanted to start a group for women who are dealing with cancer. And she asked me if I would lead that. And that's really how that started. And that was the focus. And it really was on, recovering a sense of self and hope and resilience at that point. And then, and for many, many years worked, around throughout the country with all Young Survival Coalition, SHARE, more recently with Memorial Sloan Kettering, more of a type of a yoga research study on creative recovery with cancer there. And then I started teaching yoga in a recovery center in Santa Fe. For a residential recovery center for people dealing with addiction, trauma, grief and loss. And I realized the folks that I was meeting, really the underlying questions were the same. A lot of the underlying feelings were the same, feelings of, not feeling worthy or good enough. And I thought, wow, this is more than just recovering. This is really about discovering new ways of looking at ourselves, discovering new questions to ask, maybe perhaps more empowering questions, beautiful questions, and discovering who we are behind our stories, or what's underneath the stories that we continue to tell ourselves. So they really go hand in hand. And my sense is, this joy of creative discovery is something that everybody can participate in. Softening our gazes, turning down the volume of the inner critic, embodying our experiences, to have actually a body as something that can feel pleasure and feel good. And discovering that through lots of different ways. There's not one way to do any of this. And that's what I love about it so much, because it really is a process of discovery.
It sounds like, from your story and then my own experience, if I may, it's like this view of yourself that is this wide, and then going, oh my goodness, there's actually so much more here, and coming and just, like you said, exploring, and that word wholeness of saying that's this little piece or little part, that there's so much out there that I have maybe been blind to for whatever reason.
Yeah. And so much in here too, right?
Inside. Absolutely.
And I have, we were talking about story,
Mm-hmm.
and I have just you talking about
Yeah.
that reminds me of a story.
Yes.
And it's just that, Corey, really what you're talking about. And if I may, this
Please.
is a really short one, a tiny one. And it's a woman or a man who goes to work the same way every day, same route, and decides one day to shake things up and goes a different way, and passes a window with a big goldfish bowl in it. It's a pet shop. And she thinks that will look great in my apartment. I'm going to bring that home. Just, it's about the maintenance I can handle, responsibility wise with a pet. I think I can handle a goldfish. So she brings the goldfish home and she gives it a name. Let's have a name, Corey.
Goldie.
Goldie. Perfect. So she just looks at Goldie, loves Goldie going around in her bowl every day, puts little things in there, little gnomes, makes it nice, all the rest. So then one day she realizes that Goldie's water is looking a little murky. And even though she has a small apartment, she has one of those gigantic, fabulous baths with jets in it. And so she gets the temperature just right. She gets Goldie, puts Goldie in the, Olympic-sized swimming pool bathtub, and goes out, does her business, changes the water, etc. And then she comes to the threshold of the bathroom door, and she just begins to weep when she sees Goldie. Any ideas? What do you think, Corey? Why she might?
I was going to bad. I was going to Goldie got hurt or something, somehow in some way, especially with the jets you mentioned. So I went to harm, danger.
Okay, so no.
Good.
That didn't happen. But what did happen, and that's what a lot of people think, we go there, right? Say, oh, something happened. But she was weeping because there was Goldie going round and round and round in the same circumference of the bowl that she'd always been going around in. And she thought she'd be doing laps around with all the space to travel, to explore, but no. And she was weeping because she realized she was doing the same thing in her own life. Just for Goldie, there were invisible walls. There's no way she could go any further. And, when I heard that story 2 years and years ago, I was weeping myself because I realized, how me and so many of us can put up invisible walls, that we think, just like you were saying earlier, no, like I can't, this is the edge. I'm not going past this. It's not even an option. And we put them around our hearts, around our language, around our relationships. And to be able to identify that and raise awareness around it without judging it, that's how the healing starts.
That's such a profound story because it's reflective of, I think, for sure, my human experience in the last, let's say, 3 to 5 years. But seems so too is that we get stuck in the patterns, and I don't know, there seems so much to draw from the story is that little boundary and that routine is just kind of got stuck in it. So
yeah, and I mean, it's a small little story with huge implications sometimes. And when we can put them in terms of stories, and this is why I like bringing in stories so much. I mean, that's a contemporary story, is because, you'll remember a story or can relate to a story. I think there's a Native American saying, it is Native American, that says, tell me a fact and I'll listen. But tell me a story and it will live in my heart forever.
So true.
And I believe that too, so, and then how can we enter our own stories, through hearing, whether it's an elaborate myth or a folk tale, there's always a place to enter.
So I want to get into story, but there's this question I saw, particularly on your website, which, by the way, I've put pashahogan.com in the chat there. You can check out all her work and what she does, as well as if you have questions for Pasha, we'll have some time. Put those in the Q&A button right below the video where Pasha and you can see us in the Q&A there, and I'll weave those into our conversation here. So the question that was so profound was, and I think you kind of hit on it earlier, was these questions of who am I and why am I here? But there was this other profound thing, kind of transitioned that whole phrase that all of us, who am I? Why am I here? What's my purpose? But and I want you to share it, but there was this other way and I never thought to ask the question that way. And it seems like the goldfish story of this, like there's so much in here.
Mm. So I'm sorry, I don't understand what the question is.
You say, I'm sorry, I was trying to find it on your site, but you said, instead of asking, I think it's who am I? You said it's and I'm going to butcher the question, but it's the question about the other part that has yet to be explored. It's the, I'll try to find it here in just a second, but it's just
Oh, you
another
know what
way.
I think you may be referring to? Yeah, it's and it could be from the back of my Third Time Lucky book.
Uh-huh.
And maybe I'm wrong, but it was changing the question from "Am I enough?" to "Am I enough of who I am?"
That's it. I was
Is
looking at
that
the
it?
wrong book.
Okay. Because I
Yes.
don't, the who I am one, and that's a tough one. You know?
Yeah.
Why are we
Right.
all here and what's it all for?
Yeah.
But it's that, is that what you were referring to,
Yes,
Corey?
yes,
Yeah.
yes. Am I enough of who I really am? And I thought it just stuck me, and as I was doing some prep for our conversation, because the who am I enough and the who am I is huge, but this is, am I enough of who I really am? And it's this, what I think you're is pointing back to us and this self and this unexplored part where we go in and we creatively discover that self. And I just thought it was extremely profound.
Well, that's, yeah, I think we come to that place, right? That's a question that we ask so much, we're looking for the answer outside of ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
because we're comparing. I always say the only word that comes after compare is despair, because there's always going to be, someone who has more or is less, if that's what you're after, whether it's in
Mm-hmm.
our appearance, our possessions, whatever it happens to be. So it's, really bringing it back home. It's, am I enough of who I am right now? And am I giving myself permission to rest in that, instead of always leaning forward, always racing forward? It's like, wow, how can I just, take a breath full of warmth and kindness towards myself and soften, um, that boundary, that
Mm-hmm.
invisible wall, and really not have to apologize, for who we think we are. And when I often heard that question growing up in Ireland, it's probably true of a lot of cultures. It's always, a lot of it was, who do you think you are? Like there's a great Irish expression, you've lost the run of yourself. And it's like, she's lost the run of herself. Like, who does she think she is, kind of thing. And I thought, and I love that expression. And I thought, I like that idea of losing the run of myself, and that really softening the tone of that question, infusing warmth and kindness to that question. Wow, who who do I think I am? Or, wow, what would enough be like? When is it going to be enough? And what if I was enough right here, right now, for this moment? Like, is there anything that's lacking? You know?
Yes.
Um,
I,
yeah, and just with the softness.
I love working with ILC and talking about recovery. And when I first heard I've heard the word before, of course, but in the context and so much with the work that ILC does, you do, others that I've met, I looked it up. I was like, what does recovery mean? And it was this magical thing for me. It kind of lit up my heart to say, return to this question, am I enough of who I really am, that authentic self, and this notion of creative discovery that I can go explore and find all those things that, am I just enough of me? And I love your quote, compare is to despair.
Mm.
It is about our internal work. Well, okay. So now let's talk about story. So in your workshops, creative discovery workshops, in your group work and your one-on-one work that you do, and all that's on Pasha's site, pashahogan.com. You can check that out and book appointments and see her next events and things. How do you help people learn, relearn, enter the story,
Mm, mm,
that you mentioned to talk about this whole story. Cause I see that every day, I'm starting to feel it every day. It's going, okay, I'm telling a story to myself and then I'm living and it's self-fulfilling,
mm,
and if I want to change my life, I need to change my story. It would
mm,
seem to me, but how do you
mhm.
work with your clients and, and those
Yeah,
in their
absolutely.
story?
So, well, so in the context, say, of working with in the group work that I'm doing, and there may not be an opportunity, and there isn't an opportunity very often if there's 20 or 30 people in the room to go around and hear everybody's personal story of why they're there, and that comes out, of course, during the course of time.
Mhm,
But I find when I say entering a group, to tell a story, right? And that's what I'll do right now.
mhm.
So I'll give you a taste of maybe how it can happen.
Yes, please.
So again, I'll choose a small one, just for the sake of time, and one that I think is actually really prevalent right now for what we're all going through. And I think also in in this time, contemporary modern times, what I'm finding a lot of refuge in as well is returning to a lot of these old myths, the really old myths that really show us that people hundreds, thousands of years ago were struggling with a lot of the same things or questions, different circumstances, of course, but the same, foundational questions of self-doubt, self-sabotage, um, am I enough? The language might be a little bit different, but these questions are part of the human condition. They're part of this, sea of the mind. And I have take comfort in that, that we are part of this shared humanity, and that we all go through difficult times. And so that's just, I guess, a little apart why I feel like even more so that we can draw a lot of strength and hope, from a lot of these old stories. And I'm going to tell you one now, since I'm in Ireland. I'm going to tell you one from here. And I've told it, every time I tell it, it's a little bit different. So we'll see what it sounds like tonight. But this is I call it, the wise old woman of the world. Okay. So a long time ago, this is a folk myth, a long time ago, maybe yesterday, maybe 200 years ago, we're not quite sure. Once upon a time, when people had time and it wasn't strapped onto their wrists or on their phones, there was a wise old woman who lived on the top of a mountain in a cave. And she was a Kalak, what they call here, it's like a wise old sage. We'll call her the Queen of Winter. So she is up in her cave and she is sitting and spinning and weaving. And she's weaving the most beautiful vision of the world that she thinks is possible. And nobody knows how long she's been weaving it. It could have been 3 days, 3 years, or 300 years. But she's weaving away, weaving, weaving, weaving. And she only gets up occasionally to go to the back of the cave where there's a huge big cauldron. And in that cauldron, she has every seed of every plant, of every flower, tree, herb in the entire universe. And she stirs and stirs all these seeds, making sure that they don't boil over. And this is going on for who knows how long. And then one day she hears this scuffle and her heart almost stops because she doesn't hear things like that. And she ran to the threshold, yet again, the threshold, and stood at the threshold and was just gasped. And she gasped because what she saw was that she had left the door open just a little bit, but just enough for 3 big black dogs to run in and do what any 3 big black dogs would do: have a field day with her most beautiful vision of the world and completely tear it apart to shreds. And it was pure chaos on the floor. And she just stood and paused. And the story goes that we don't know how long she paused for. It could have been 3 minutes, 3 days, or 300 years. We don't know. But the pause was absolutely crucial to the next part of the story. And I'm going to pause the story there for a minute, because I feel a lot of the time, when we're meeting our clients, when people are the world right now, right, for ourselves, we're going along, living our lives, weaving a life that we think is beautiful or okay or enough or whatever it happens to be, and something happens, that we didn't plan, maybe we didn't foresee it happening, and everything's torn apart. Like our visions are torn apart, our lives are torn apart, and most people can relate to that, if they're on the threshold, right, of the next part, but it hasn't happened yet, so it's like this pause. So usually somewhere around here, I would pause it and I'd, ask people to, can they relate to that? Or was there something that happened? What was that? Was it an event? Was it a slow unfolding, And then there's so many symbols already in that story, with the seeds and the churning and, 3 black dogs. Usually, I know here in Irish mythology, a lot of that is, whether it's, sadness, depression coming in. And that, she's a wise old woman. She knew enough to have that door shut, but was it just open because that's the way it goes? Or does that need to happen every now and again? Or would the world stop if she ever finished it? Maybe it's like all these unknown, and people come in with, different, they enter in different places and interpret things. And I don't make the story small by interpreting what it means, right? It's like, here's a story. Let's see what spin you want to put on it. And then after a while, we come back to the story and it's like, okay, here we are. The pause is crucial. This is your pause right now. And being here in this recovery center, whether it's integrative life or wherever it happens to be, what if this was your pause and that this is actually crucial? What happens during this pause, whether it's nothing for a little while or it's the digging, the questioning, the learning new tools, new ways to integrate parts of the past. So the pause is crucial. And really bringing that, that pause of like very an important part for all of us now, right now, this pause that the world, has been in and is still in very much. So the next part after this pause is that we don't know how long it lasted for. She takes a big breath in and her body relaxes and she starts to walk over with a lighter step to her wheel and she sees all the threads, but now she doesn't see chaos. She sees choices. She sees opportunities. She sees that now she has, after the pause, a more beautiful vision than her heart or soul ever thought was even imaginable or possible. And she makes different choices and she starts weaving another pattern. And it doesn't mean she only picks up the shiny, gorgeous pieces. There's some of those darker pieces or hard pieces that may be a bit more difficult to work with. And she can choose what parts of those. Maybe they're not the biggest pattern in the story, but they're a part of the weave. And, then there might be a creative exercise after that. It's like, wow, what threads would you like to pick up? What threads do you think you can put down now? What, if you gave yourself permission to imagine, what would that look like for you, and I'm always amazed by where you just never know where any of this is going to go. And it's just a very humbling experience to be a compassionate witness for that whole process. And then to help people through stories, through storytelling, to become their own most compassionate witness, to really have compassion for, the mess on the floor, the mess that they think their lives are in right now, and maybe have a look at it from a slightly different vantage point.
When you frame it like in the story, it's so powerful because you're right. As you were telling it, I started to go, okay, the 3 dogs, what are they in my own life? And I'm sure
Right.
those listening here today, same thing can resonate because it is, us humans have been telling stories for how as ancient as the days. So what a powerful way to frame that. A lot of the people that in the question for signing up for this, we're talking about how do we translate that to clients. I'm not a clinician, as you probably recall at all, but it seems like what a powerful framework in story to there is what could be conceived of destruction. This thing I've been working on for so long, my identity, or
Right.
whatever that is. And then the pause. I think that's the work, and to see that there is, I love that what you said was, my paraphrase is from chaos to seeing choices that you can make, what threads you pick up and things like that. So that's so beautiful.
I think, and just that question, like from some of the clinicians here, I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of, therapists here. This is for therapists.
Yes.
And, it's that piece exactly. It's like, how do we then, empower our clients to enter a piece of the story, what resonated, what's alive for you in that, whatever it happens to be. It depends on the group and everything, of course, and what's alive for you. Because if it's not alive for you, it's probably not going to translate either. But making those choices with stories that we tell that, can be teaching stories, but, stories that you can live, and then it's like that pause. All right, how can we use this pause right now? What would be useful? How can we incorporate more pauses into our day, to just stop, to take some breaths full of warmth and kindness, to maybe ask yourself a question, what's the kindest thing I can do for myself right now? Especially as a clinician also,
Yes.
what
Oh,
is the
yes.
kindest thing I can do for myself right now? What's the most compassionate thing I can do for this whole situation, which includes you, right? So, and then the tools, the threads, the tools, there's, I feel like it can be, they have worked over the last 20 years. I've been using, poetry and stories and, all different ways of, embodying our stories and participating them in a more conscious way.
So we got a great question here. Val says, Pasha, so love you and your work. Thank you for sharing who you really are. Can you take a minute and talk about what you offer to individuals and how that relates to what is happening on the macrocosm of change we're all in with current events, from pandemic to politics, struggling through polarization toward our shared humanity? And Sherry seconds it.
Okay.
How you take healing into what is often seen as a pretty broken world right now.
Right. Yeah. Well, first of all, hi, Val and Sherry. I'm so happy you're here. You tuned in. And yeah, how do we bring then, right? How do we do this? Right? How do we create the space in our own lives first to give ourselves permission to pause, right? And I think that's really important, is that, it's like, no, we're not doing something wrong. because of the chaos or what's going on in the world right now. And it's this shared experience. Of course, what everyone's saying is like, we are all in this together, but we all are entering it in a different place, as well. And I think the healing can begin when we can acknowledge that there's a wound, personally, collectively, there's a big collective wound right now. And just starting close in, really starting close in. And David White, the beautiful poet who I admire so much, says, start close in. Don't start with the second step or the third. Start with the first thing, the first step, close in, the step you don't want to take. And the poem goes on, but I really feel it's all right there. Very often the healing starts with starting close in, and with ourselves. And that step that sometimes we don't want to take, which might be to just pause, and it's the permissions to do that, and bringing in the kindness and the compassion and the mindfulness and things that bring you joy, because I think joy heals, and whether they're tiny, even if our movements are restricted right now. I mean, here it's in Ireland, it's been locked down for pretty much since I got here. 5 kilometers you can't move really outside of, since Christmas, and it's the healing starts close in. And then I've been doing a lot of that work myself since I've been here, because I can't get distracted with going all these places and fabulous cliffs on the West Coast. I'm here, so it's not easy. I'm not going to pretend for a second that it is. And it's that practice of slowing down the breath, getting in touch with our bodies, connecting with people that we trust
as best we can, for sure.
as best we can.
Michelle said, so glad to be here. Psychotherapist, addiction specialist, life coach with the mindfulness practice in LA. Oftentimes I share with clients that Zen moment that Tara Brock, I think is how you spell the name,
Oh, yeah.
or say speaks of. And also I share Pema Chodron, who speaks about the only permanence being impermanence. Thank you both. This is important.
And thank you, Michelle, for bringing those two amazing teachers, Tara Brock and Pema Chodron. They've been great mentors for me too over the years, and I return to them over and over again. Yeah, it's timeless.
And to kind of Val's point earlier, and also Michelle, this quote from Pema, only permanence is impermanence. When I read some of the work that on your website in particular, and saw the word uncertainty, I go, this is this last year in particular for me has felt so uncertainty all around everywhere we go. Vaccines coming, or when is that going to all take effect? Will it take effect? What are the precautions? And it's this, every time for me, I felt that there's a normal, you get back to some routine, the goldfish going around the bowl,
right?
So feels like a big rock gets thrown in and you kind of get disturbed. And I feel like that's how many of us feel. It's all of our norms have been disrupted. And do you see that one with the people you work with, and how, again, is it the pause in the story, the old woman in the cave? Is it the opportunity for the pause?
Well, it's, unfortunately, it's like this forced pause sometimes, which aren't as easy to, which is often the case,
Yes.
But I feel when you're talking about that word uncertainty, I think it's been used so much. I mean, there's so much uncertainty, and it reminds me of a group I'm doing right now, a women's group here in Ireland, and it's called Living with Joy and Uncertainty. Is that they don't have to be completely separate things. And it's that inclusiveness, like, yes, it is an uncertain time. Absolutely. And how can we live in these uncertain times and also have space for, unexpected joys? Mary Oliver talks about joy is not meant to be a crumb, you know. So when I'm working in this context of the uncertainty, yes, I'm hearing that. And everybody that I'm working with, I'm experiencing it myself constantly. We all are. And it's, yes, it's uncertain, and it's acknowledging that, it's accepting that. It's creating some space for some other feelings to be beside it as well. And honestly, this really time has brought me very much back to those 20 years ago, you know, when you hear, as I'm sure just for many people who have experienced illness or uncertainty in their life at all, you know, and I think most people here probably have experienced some uncertainty in their life, whether it's with their health or, you know, recovery in their own lives. And it's like, you know, there are so many strengths that we have to draw upon. You know, we've all known uncertainty before, you know, as a culture, as a society, as a person, you know, just leading a life. There's so much uncertainty. And it's really recalling and drawing on the strengths, you know, that are there, like what's gotten you through before, you know, how can we build on that? Learning some new tools to help us soften into this, because I feel like it's going to be a while, folks. You
Yes.
know, we're all kind of understanding that.
It's the long haul for sure. Hey, everybody, I've been talking to Pasha Hogan, pashahogan.com. You can check out her books and her other work, her workshops, creative discovery workshops, one-on-one and group practice groups that she's got going. Head over to pashahogan.com. And if you have questions for Pasha, don't let me just hog her, and I will. I'll keep going on these rounds. But we're here for you. She's graciously given of her time to share her story and how she operates in the world. You know, one thing you said, I think often gets overlooked in the retreat, I guess we could say, that ILC put on last year in Boulder that you and I got to meet. I was the lone oddball non-clinician in the group, but it seemed like so many clinicians needed a pause, that so busy filling your life in your life's work, helping others heal on their journey. And it seemed like what I saw from that, and it was incredible for me too, but it's just a moment to take a deep breath, to have just that pause for themselves too, and be, for lack of a better word, ministered to instead of serving, you know, being served instead of serving others.
Yeah, I am so grateful to Sherry Young and Lee McCormick and Patty and everyone who was there at that retreat this time last year in Boulder, because uh, there was so much fun too. You
Oh
know,
yeah.
even though people were tired and exhausted and needed that time out, just not to even have to take care of anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And again, the commonalities, even people working in different fields, different parts of the country, and just that, I know, which I think a lot of us are craving now, just that getting together,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
getting together, and pausing together collectively, taking time out for ourselves, so incredibly important. And the joy piece, because,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it was so much fun, you
Yes.
know,
Yes.
as well.
Okay, Michelle has a question. Pasha, do you teach yoga online since we can't travel yet?
Great question. I haven't been teaching online, but I'm going to start probably doing that soon. So let's stay in touch, or drop onto my mailing list. I've been actually taking a lot of yoga, do it myself, and doing more of a 500-hour teacher training, even though I've been teaching for 20 years, delving deep. That was my gift to myself during these last 6 months, was really working more with trauma-informed yoga and taking a lot more courses and classes. So I'm excited to start sharing that.
using the forced pause as a way to return and sharpen your.
Yeah, that was a real gift to myself, and I'm really happy that I'm still doing that. It's great.
Colby asked a great question. What resources, and by the way, post your questions in the Q&A button right below our video here. But Colby asked a great question. What resources do you recommend for finding great stories aside from Tara and Pema? Do you have a resource, or how do you kind of source some of these that you can kind of relate and then share with in clinical context?
That's a really great question. So for me, I know I love Michael Meade. If you're not familiar with him, he's a phenomenal mythologist. Mosaic Voices he has a podcast, and Mosaic Voices is a organization, nonprofit. He's been running out of Washington State for, I don't know, over 10 years. And I love listening to Michael Meade. He has fed me so many great stories over the years. And I would also say stories that are close to maybe your own heritage or culture or land, where your ancestors are from. I like Sharon Blackie as well. She wrote If Women Rose Rooted. It's a great Selkie story in there. Yeah, I mean, and where you are, place of where you're actually living, the land that you're actually living on, in the areas that you're living on, find out about those. And once you start looking for stories, they're going to track you down, right? Once you're like saying to the universe, okay, like I'm ready for this, you're going to start noticing. So that's what I would say, what you're interested in, what you're interested in.
I like that, looking around you too. A lot of the stories that I have come from family, or I live in Oklahoma. So a lot of comparisons there. That's great. Michelle says she saw Michael Meade, and I put links, by the way, to the people that you referenced, Pasha, in the chat for those to click on. So I appreciate that. Michelle says Michael Meade was brilliant. I can recommend Sharon Salzberg, Jack Cornfield, and Rick Hansen. So thank you for sharing that, Michelle.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. And Michelle, there's also, I think you asked about the yoga. I have a yoga DVD, it's for free online on YouTube now. So if you go to my YouTube channel, there's a morning practice and an evening practice. So maybe you'll enjoy those.
Yeah. By the way, if you go to pashahogan.com, at the very bottom, you'll see the subscribe button and also links to her YouTube, but I'll put those in the chat as well. All right. Other questions for Pasha while we have her? She's getting into her, you said nighttime earlier, and I thought, yeah, that's right. You're in Ireland.
Yeah, it's nearly 6 here. So.
And I know you grew up and have had deep experiences in Ireland, but it seemed like traveling, you get those stories. I was just thinking, I've been to Portugal before, and there's just when you start asking people about the history and the stories that they tell, it's just such rich. When we can travel again.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. If you have questions for Pasha Hogan, please post those in the Q&A. You can go to pashahogan.com and find out more and look at what do you have coming up next. I was trying to look before we started here about some of your online workshops. Do you have some dates in mind or that you're working on?
Well, I'm just in the middle of one now. I started doing these 3 Sundays, 3 Sundays with Pasha, I call it. It's an hour and a half. We're right in the middle of one now. We just finished one. Actually, Sherry and Val were on that, which was so wonderful. It's such a treat for me. So this is called For a New Beginning. And this is, working with Irish mythology and folk tales, bringing us up to Imbolc, which is February 1st. The Celtic calendar, it's the first day of spring. And so that's what's happening right now. So, and there'll probably be something around March time. I like to do something, every other month, usually a 3-week series. And so that's kind of what's on the cards right now, and workshops and traveling, all that's been put on hold like everybody else. So I'm getting creative with new ways to offer.
That's awesome.
Things,
And those are all the Sundays with you are Zoom group
Yeah,
meetings.
there's small, intimate groups, up to 12 people. So it's not a presentation, so it's more interactive, where there's some storytelling, there's prompts, and then there's sharing and breakouts, and
Mhm.
yeah, in a format that feels inclusive and
Well,
interactive.
so one thing that was just asked was talking about your book, The Joy of Discovery. Sorry to cut you off, Pasha. But I wanted to get to this because as I was reading it too, I was so curious. I'll be ordering that book for sure afterwards. But it's more of a workbook, right? With prompts and
Yes.
things like that.
Yeah, this is, I actually happen to have it here. Funny
Yes.
enough. So yeah, it's a workbook and when I say workbook, it's like a playbook, workbook, there's prompts in it. It's really a lot of they're all practices. So there's 10 different practices taken from workshops that I've done for years. So maybe the practice of beginning, for example,
Hmm.
the practice of gratitude, the practice of resting, the practice of creating sacred space, practice of medicine. So they're practices because I think if practice means noticing, right? If we can notice something, whether it's a thought or an action, or we can start participating in, oh, is this helpful? Is this something I want to continue? And so it's in a playful way. And there's also meditations, links to guided meditations, also to help you in your own practice, right? And develop one that's really personalized and going to work for you. So yeah, that's definitely more, of an interactive, enter where you want to that too. You don't have to do them in a row or anything.
Yeah, Val mentions there's great prompts for therapists to use with clients in the book, and that's outstanding.
Yeah, and
And
that is the part. Yeah, is like, here, now you take this, make it yours. You take this and embellish and work with your clients with it. We're all here to share and help each other.
Okay, well, I've been talking to my friend Pasha Hogan. Thank you so much. It's been such a gift today, and I hope you all will go to pashahogan.com. But so you've got YouTube channel, I know that's on your website too, and I put links in the
Yeah.
chat. Your book, Third Time Lucky, and your workbook, The Joy of Creative Discovery. You can find all those at pashahogan.com. Hit the about. You'll see a link that says Books by Pasha. Click that, and you'll get right to those links. And then on the left side are your creative workshops that you talked about, creative discovery, ways to interact with you. So,
Great. Thank you.
Pasha, thank you
So
so
fun.
much.
It was
No,
great to see you again.
you
And
too.
I hopefully we'll all be able to get together again at some point later this year. We'll
Would
see.
love that.
Me
Well,
too.
stay safe and healthy, and I hope your return trip is fast and safe and good.
Thank
You
you.
get
Me
back
too.
to Santa Fe.
I'm excited. Thank you, everybody, for spending some time with us all today. I'm really glad that you took some time to do that. So, and a pleasure and honor. Thanks.
So you can learn more about interviews like this with great clinicians and in the world at integrativelifenetwork.com. Thanks so much, Pasha, and thanks everyone for being here today.
All right. Thanks, Integrative Life. Beautiful. Thanks, Corey.
Yes, ma'am. Bye-bye.